check this. I'm just going to check the, oh, don't want to do it on that one.
We'll do it live.
I just heard that. That's great.
I've not heard of CTFtime.org. Should check it out. Wait, is this some sketchy Russian site?
No, I'm surprised you haven't. It's one that I have always referred people to, but like to me, it's one of the better, I guess, well kept, up to date sites for if you want to like find a CTF.
Huh. Yeah, it's got collections all over, teams, leaderboards. All right, Joseph, what's your handle's name? Are you on this leaderboard? I like DeadSec. That's kind of a cool name, whoever has that.
All right. It looks like we are recording. All right. It looks like, yeah, I can hear myself. Which is always good when you can hear your own microphone. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. I do intros and outros afterwards. So again, this is meant to be conversational. Anybody here with a question, feel free to chime in. And then anyone on chat, feel free to ask a question like we've already been doing. We'll go back and forth. But I guess I'll let you guys introduce yourself. I don't know who wants to go first. We'll make it that awkward, fun thing where people just point and figure out who's going first.
I'm happy to start. My name is James Pope. I call myself an InfoSec junkie. I weirdly like this even in my free time. I am the director of technical marketing engineering, and I'm also over technical enablement here at Corelight. But in the community of InfoSec, I do things like I'm on the committee to help run SaintCon, which is in Utah, B-Side Salt Lake, B-Sides Cache. I help run Black Hat. I'm in the NOC. I'm a SOC lead for the Black Hat NOC. And yeah, I help out the social engineering community at DEF CON as well.
Go ahead, Vincent. Go ahead.
I'll go next then. My name is Vince Stouffer. I am our field CTO at Corelight. I came out of, much of my past is basically being a network or security engineer or incident responder. So I've spent a lot of time doing CTFs in the past, although not setting them up and running them like Pope has. But yeah, I love nothing more than getting interested and involved with network traffic. And that's really what sparked my curiosity for security back in the day, was looking at packets, analyzing traffic, and now getting to work for a company where we take that to the bigger community. So excited to be here and take part in the conversation.
Excited to look at packets? Like that was what are exciting about packets? Like what gets you excited about looking at them?
It's just well, let's not say packets per se, but the connections that they make up, because being able to see real network traffic live as it's going across the wire, it was just, I don't know, for me as like a network engineer, right? It's like putting the practical aspect of security into what you kind of knew. Okay, I know how to connect computer A to computer B. I've learned a lot about the protocols that make that happen. But like when you actually see it and you see someone typing over a management session or something on the wire, it's like, wow, I'm actually seeing something in action. And then as you start to build that into, career of InfoSec, then you're watching attackers type something over that same management session and saying, whoa, I can actually like perhaps influence the way that history is going to go in this particular event. Or maybe I'm looking at the event from the past and, figuring out what happened and writing up a report. And so I was never as interested on the host stuff as I was on the network stuff, just because that's where I came from. That was my history.
Well, and you're at the perfect company for that too, with Corelight, for sure.
All right, I'll go last. My name's Blake. I had a career in the military doing offensive cyber on behalf of both the United States Army and NSA, doing that type of thing that we can't talk about here. Got out, did network-based threat hunting for another NDR company, and just recently came on board with Corelight. Not to steal James's thunder, because I can't really compete, but I did get to do 3 Black Hat NOC cycles before Corelight kind of kicked out my former company. So And I'll be the guy doing CTF for y'all next week. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah, in fact, we need to mention that next week you can sign up on meetup.com. We are having people register, so we're going to send out a link. Looks like we've gotten 17 people signed up so far. We'll kind of talk about we were going to do that for this month, but I was like, let's be ambitious for this month, because usually we just do one meetup, and I was like, that was going to be it. But it was like, oh well, let's go ahead and do our regular meetup and talk about like how to participate in CTF. Kind of turn it into this podcast recording. So appreciate you guys putting that on too. And it's free, right? It's go to meetup.com, register. We'll get coordinated as far as setting people up with, getting them the link. We'll email them all the link, and people can join. And as far as I know, and you guys can correct me here, anyone can join, right? People that have done CTFs before, or people that are just, curious about CTFs and wanting to start getting into it.
I'm gonna let the host and y'all decide as far as feasibility of the back end. Yeah, it can work however we want. So that'll be a Blake and you decision, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, I'll be there to help anyone through. I've been through it myself coming on board. Obviously you give before you give it to somebody else. That's the beauty of this type of CTF. It really can, be as, difficult as you make it, or as easy as, the presenter can make it. So I'll be in a breakout room, able to help anyone that is, struggling or maybe not as familiar with Zeek or network-based data. And, we'll just do the best we can.
Are you going to limit how many people can attend?
You said we're at like 17,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I feel like at that number, if you get a couple more, that's fine. If anything, we can bring somebody else from Corelight in to accommodate more. I don't want to be prohibitive. I think we'll be able to handle it. And being virtual, right? I'll be in a breakout room. I'll be able to have people flood in if they need help on a specific question. I'm sure we can accommodate as many as you can bring in, as long as it's not a couple hundred. I mean, if we get to a couple hundred, we might have to have a different conversation.
Again, that was one of the first things I asked. Is like, what are we capping this or what? And I never got an answer. So I was like, all right, if we get 2,000 people signed up, I hope you guys are ready for it.
Yeah,
when I'm teaching people to run the CTF, I tell them 20-1 is usually your good ratio.
Okay.
Right. So 20 participants to one person administrating it allows you to help people progress without them bashing their head as hard. However, I mean, this system, we've run it as many as 250 people at a time, with a bunch of people helping. So it'll be fine. I'm not worried about that. And then you can scale up depending on how much help you're providing. So Blake can bring in somebody else, or he can change that ratio a little bit.
Yeah. So I don't know I don't think we've mentioned it, but James, you're the one that pretty much built a lot of the CTF infrastructure, correct?
Yeah, me and my team. I got smart people who do a lot of the smart work. I'm just the manager who pushes buttons. But we have us in the training department have built a bunch of this out. I used to run the training department, so I did a lot of it there. So as far as examples, and we use CTFD for their game board, and then we have various endpoints to look in data from, depending on the CTF. I think we'll probably do an investigator one, but we have Splunk ones, Elastic ones, and log scale ones as well. We also have a combined endpoint and NDR one with CrowdStrike. So yeah, we built a lot of these things out.
So how does this CTF like actually work? Like when we get on this Google Meetup with everybody, like how do we get started? How do people start doing challenges, things like that?
Yeah, I assume Blake will kick you off. Like, here's the start. He'll have some intro. We like to cover some like tips of things that people get stuck on or ask the same questions over and over, like multiple people. So it's like, here's some getting pointers to get going. And then at that point, we provide them CTFD link, right? Here's your link. Everybody gets in, they register, get your own password, and then that, whatever the person running it, so Blake running it, can decide which challenges to open up. It'll default opening up to our latest one, but there's other ones in there he can open. And so opening that up, the first question is access, and access will give you a link to a SIM or an environment and credentials on how to get access to the place where you're actually going to be doing the network forensics. And then it'll ask you questions. So you have one window open with CTFD questions, one window open with your SIM. Some people will split monitor between the two. Some will multi-monitor between the two, however you're set up. And then you look at the questions, go find the answers. Try not to get them wrong. You get negative points, and use hints if you need them, but it costs you points. So, that's why you reach out to the person running it and say, hey, I don't like this question. I don't think it's worded right, or etc.
Yeah, well, I hadn't really. I've participated in a few. Like I'm not one that goes and does a lot of CTFs, but that's interesting. Of like getting a hint, you kind of detract some points, or you have to kind of pay some points to get a hint.
Yeah. So our hints built into CTFD are a -5 points.
Okay.
Right. And the goal isn't to go as fast as you can. The goal is to get the most answers in whatever that period of time is. So he'll set some window. This is the start time. This is the end time. And it's whoever has the most points. So what happens is some people will rush it, just pasting answers, brute forcing it kind of, and they're going to get -1, -1, -1. And then like at the end, you'll see somebody leapfrog them and win the whole game because they just were a little slower, answered the questions, read them a little more carefully. Like, I don't like this question. Like, this is also a right answer. And you're like, well, it said server request, right? Like, so sometimes they just don't pay attention and they go a little too fast.
Yeah, I think that's something I was going to mention as a tip or a trick, because I know we're talking about some of those, right? Just walking away for a minute is something that I use, because let's say I'm working on a question and it's a harder one, and I'm pretty sure I got the answer, and I put it in, I get it wrong. Well, I've just lost the point. But if I just hammer away, it's not that, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. Now I've lost 5 points, right? Whereas I find if I just step away, get a drink of water, come back, read the question again, and then like post that, I'm like, it said server, not client. I was focused on the wrong thing. Or you read the question again, right? And you just kind of, makes sense to you the second time. You go, that's not how I read the question at all the first time, right? So yeah, don't be afraid to just walk away, take a breath, come back to it.
Are you able to move to different challenges?
Depends on how the board is set up. So ours are typically progression, because they're trying to start easier, get a little harder, right? And it's trying to progress you through a real scenario. So we typically use them in order: 1, then 2, then 3. But there are sometimes, like, depending on what we're doing, like we run a lot for Cyber Cup, which is this big cash prize CTF thing in Alabama. And we'll open up multiple at a time. So even though they progress, they have an option of like 8 different challenges, and they can work through this, get stumped, go over here, come back. But typically for a standard CTF, we're going to have a single challenge that they walk through. And if you're stuck, like I would like to say, like, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be challenging. It's not supposed to be bash your head bloody on a wall challenging. So if you find that you reach that state, or before that state, hopefully, that's when you ask for a little bit of help. We don't give answers, but we'll give you guidance. We'll be like, hey, do you remember, like, certificates are in the SSL log? You might want to go check there versus where you're at. Like, we'll guide them in the right direction without, giving them the inquiry or the answer.
Yeah, so we should probably mention that this is like a network focused CTF. So what skills are people preparing for this? Like, what would be something that would be good for them to have prior to participating in the CTF?
I mean, it's pretty friendly. So as long as you curious, think, problem solve, want to understand, what started thing to thing. I mean, the bulk of it's all right there in a UI, and you just got to know where to find it, right? You can also go to the backend log scale and go query through that. So the more advanced people, I would say log scale querying or some sort of SIM querying for all CTFs that are in some sort of a SIM is a good idea to know that. This one particularly, I believe, will be in log scale. So they used to have a community edition of Humio you could go get. But I mean, you can go look at their syntax on the website. You can see the type of stuff that's in there. And yeah, just be curious, pay attention when the tips are coming up, because those tips are things that catch a lot of people. Like if Blake's like, hey, this is how you do a fetch more in a group by, the reason he's showing you because you're going to need it. So if you don't pay attention to that, later you're going to be like, where's my results? Oh, here's some log scale tips.
So this is like, so for this CTF, you're logging into like a VM or virtual machine or something, and then you have all the tools there?
It'll be a link with credentials into an environment that has everything you need.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And then you just have to open that stuff up and start I guess, like you said,
Yep.
going through it. So
There's things in there like download PCAP. You don't need it for the CTF. You can if you want. It's going to grab it by session, but
gotcha.
not needed. But if you're a Wireshark nerd and you want to do that, go for it. I ain't going to stop you.
Is Wireshark on there then? I'm assuming. No.
No, we do have when I run those for the CTF, I use WebShark because getting a bunch of students to install Wireshark is harder than you think. Right? Like it seems easy. You go install Wireshark and like, well, my corporate machine won't let me install Wireshark, and you run into all these problems. So we implemented WebShark, which is open source Wireshark that just stays in the browser.
Yeah, some companies now like will lock down, like it's like I could actually use this tool. Like browsers are the next thing where people shouldn't have lock a lot of that stuff down. But yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, some of the data, much of the data that we're working with is based on Zeek, the open source network monitoring tool that our company founders created and that Corelight is kind of built around. And there's plenty of information about Zeek on the web. You know, you can search for Zeek logs. There's tutorials on all the different kinds of logs, including the ones that you'd probably see there. But a lot of it also, if we're using Investigator, is focused around a detection, an alert, something that's been generated from perhaps Zeek, perhaps Suricata, perhaps something else. So another sort of, network engine that's generated an alert, and then the prompts are asking you to help investigate what that alert was about and how it might have been formed and why it's alerting and what the underlying data is. And so there's a lot of places where the CTF will guide you to find that answer, even if you're not quite so familiar with how the data is structured or how it's laid out or organized or whatever.
Gotcha. So Zeek would be something to get familiar with then too.
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't hurt. Go to cry.zeek.org. It's an open source site ran by Zeek community. It is no ads, like it's literally just a utility that you can use. That is your friend. I mean, it's built there for scripting, right? Like there's a whole like tutorial on how to script this. You don't need to do any of that. You can just go down to the bottom, select one of those PCAPs, click run, and you're going to see the type of logs that get generated from a PCAP.
What was that address again? Because I just tried to put it in. I'm streaming in.
Try.org.
You said try.zeek.org?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
I was doing cry, which I was like, some people might cry for. I was like, that's a weird name for a CTF, but okay.
So this was not a CTF. It's a free site to help people learn how to do Zeek scripting, but you can use it to just click PCAP, click run, upload your own PCAP, click run, and you're going to see what types of logs are outputted through there. To tie this into a question Joseph asked in chat, he said, has it ever done a SANS summit? When I did some of the SANS certifications and CTFs, I would win a lot of the network ones. Weird, right? But the way I would win them is doing something like shove it into Zeek. They're expecting you to use Wireshark and go through and pull out this data, right? And so you shove it into Zeek or Suricata or try.zeek.org if the PCAP's small enough, and 99% of your answers are just there and super easy, especially if you have it in some sort of a sim available that you can query. Like you can just wreck those CTFs super quick.
Yeah, totally. I had the same experience many times, maybe especially before Zeek was a little more widely used in the industry. And they were written for kind of the Wireshark folks or packet junkies who are kind of looking at things at that level. And the way Zeek works, it's connection oriented. So it puts everything together and writes out all the protocols that were used on that connection and its various logs. And so answering those questions is as simple as going to the right log and finding the answer that is, for the question that's asked. So I remember this one CTF, I just sat down with a partner and I said, just read me the questions and I'll just go find the answers. And so they would read the question so I wouldn't have to look at that or worry about it. And I'm just sitting there in Splunk or wherever on the command line, I think probably looking at the text of Zeek logs and we just totally destroyed it, check, we're done over here, right? It's like everyone's like, wait, what? We just started loading the PCAPs into Wireshark. What's going on?
So that site's good for other CTFs, not just this one.
If the PCAP's small enough, there's a limit on the size, but yeah, I've used that. Absolutely. We have a thing called CyberLab, which is like our own internal sensor connected to, like, you can spin up this ephemeral lab environment, and we use it for like the paid student trainings have them too. And I use the heck out of things like that, right? Where I can just upload a PCAP, run it, go into Splunk, do freeform searching, and just get answers really quick. Big fan.
That's cool. So what's the most interesting, going back kind of some of the SAN stuff, what's the most interesting CTF you've ever been involved in?
SaintCon for me. So SaintCon does a lot of stuff similar to DEF CON. It's from Utah. It's about a 2,000 people conference. And you can spend, and it's an entire week. It's like Tuesday through Friday. You can spend the entire time just doing the CTF. And the winner of that gets, very similar to DEF CON. You get a black badge. You can come free to the conference. And I spent a lot of time working on those for a few years. And some was very gratifying. You learn a lot of really cool things. Like they force you into a lot of things that I hadn't considered or learned. And some are very bash your head frustrating. And you got to like understand the person who wrote it and their mindset. So yeah, I mean, I spent like almost a solid week playing some CTFs and I still lost. So
wait, so do you research the person that created the CTF before you go into a CTF to try and get into their, because that's an interesting comment. I try to get into their mind.
You shouldn't have to, but sometimes when it's Kevin, you need to. Kevin. But I mean, to tie this to what you're saying, like there is something of like, if you can understand how they're made, they're a little bit easier to answer sometimes, right? Like there's a logical thing they're trying to guide you through, some sort of a challenge they want you to stress in some direction. So like if you can understand that, and then if you do have access to an entire data set, they dump you into Splunk or something, and it is all open questions and it's not guiding you through, there's a lot of ways that you can flip that. So it's asking you about a file name. So instead of looking through the path that says to get the file name, just go search for all file names in the entire data set. Oh, there's one, there's your answer. You don't even have to even look at it or learn anything. I'm not advising you to do that, but that is a way you can wreck some CTFs. Is the mindset of the person. They're trying to do this. Sometimes you can look at it the other way too.
Hack the hack the CTF essentially, like you're doing this. I've seen that at other conferences where like they put up an announcement of can you guys please stop DDoS in the CTF because someone's trying to brute force something. It's like you don't need to do this, right? So
right.
But other times, yes, you're right. Where there's other creative solutions to the problem that maybe the CTF person either didn't think about, or if you get into their mindset, you can kind of understand what they're trying to get at, right?
Right.
One of my favorites has been that, speaking of SANS, that holiday hack challenge that has happened for many years. Those were awesome. I mean, both because they started easy and got really hard, and because they had a cool story, right? I mean, they spent a lot of time writing them. They were all different. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, you load up a board and do this thing, right? It was like you're into the story and you're trying to figure out all the pieces. And I agree with Pope that like some other interesting ones I've done. I did a cloud one recently, and it's not like an area I'm super knowledgeable on. So it really challenged me to go and like figure this stuff out. So it's like asking the questions, oh, how do you, get, find out where this service is running, find the logs, and then you're going to, even with the hint, I'd be like, wow, I don't know what they're talking about. So I'd have to go spend, an hour researching. How does this architecture fit together? How do you run this? What's the user? Blah, blah, blah. Then so you're finding yourself challenged so much just by a single question that by the time, you get through 10, you're like, wow, not only have I like learned so much, but I did get the answer in the end. It like gives you that gamesmanship, that motivation to actually go out and like figure something out that you didn't know in order to answer the question, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Blake, do you have a favorite CTF or an interesting one that you can remember going through?
I have not been to many in-person CTFs. When COVID hit, couldn't go into work that much. So I had probably like a 6-month deep dive on Hack the Box. Other than that, really haven't had too much direct exposure to any of the conferences or stuff like that. Didn't really have that much ability to go, to be honest. But Hack the Box was really my entry point. It can be very difficult depending on the box type, but that was really what kind of got me into everything. Really solidified like the threat hunting and being involved in that aspect of the community.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I'm not a lot of people get into it. And as James mentioned with the, like I remember seeing that at DerbyCon, but even DEF CON, right? People just go there and that's all they do is the CTF the entire time. And I'm just like, that's not my jam. Cause they do spend a lot of time, getting into that kind of stuff. I'm more like, hey, I just want to come in, maybe help out with the challenge, and then I kind of scratch that itch and I'm done, right?
I enjoy, no, maybe it's just because I'm getting old now, but I enjoy the 2 hour to half a day CTFs the best. The multi-day ones, the moment I hear like the duration, I'm like mentally checked out. I'm like, oh, like I don't have time to do that.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like holy crap.
Well, it's a lot of effort too, right? And you almost at that point have you have your own team because you want to rotate, or you have a specialized person for like different things, or they're assigned to like, I guess, different tasks within the CTF.
Yeah, those big ones like DEF CON, that's exactly what they do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you guys, the Corelight CTF isn't like that. It's meant to be. Is it meant to be individual? Is it meant to be team, or kind of both?
We ran it as both. Typically, by default, it'll be individual. But we ran one last week for 130 people, and it was team-based, teams of 5 or 6. So
That's cool. Was that virtual or in person?
that was in person.
That's
Yeah.
what I figured. Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, I think all the teams I've done have typically been in person.
I would imagine, because that's where you get the whole, like, everyone gets a circle table and you all just kind of sit
Yep.
down and work together. But at that point too, you're trying to, if you're competing against other teams, you're trying to listen for other things as well too, that they might be good. And you hear the shut up, stop giving the flag up.
So somebody inevitably will come up to me and be like, "Hey, I'm too old, so can you turn the music down?" Right? They might word it different, but typically somebody will come up and say something about that. And there's a fine line of walking of background noise to suppression of table to table. And so you want to find that. And it is a little louder. Like you want the table to be able to communicate, but you don't want them to hear each other as much as possible. So it is louder than most people like, but there's a purpose and they don't understand that. Or they do and they don't want it on. But I'm just like, oh, you're just too old. You don't like music? And they're like, no, it's just hard to sing.
What was it, Airheads? If you're too loud, if it's too loud, you're too old or something. And he just turned it up. So at that point, it's just like turn up a little more. Turn up. What kind of music do you like playing during your CTFs?
I have my go-to. It is a Skittish and Bus 90-minute. So I typically CTFs I'll run by default will be about 2 hours. So that's the standard walking in. We've ran some that have been like 10, 12, 20 hours before, but it'll be like 2 hours. So I usually have like a 30 minutes here, get everybody in, get them registered, quick tips, tricks, how to, and then let them loose. And then I play this playlist, and it's a Skittish and Bus B-side Salt Lake 2015. It's on Mixcloud. I play that every single time. It's a hacker mix with a bunch of movie quotes, and that's my go-to. I have like 3 other failovers if it's longer, but that's my start every single time.
You just, outside of, other than hacker quotes, I did not understand any other words that you just said. So I'm assuming it's like a
group called Skittish and Bus. They're awesome.
Okay.
If you Google Skittish and Bus B-side SLC 2015.
Okay, so that's online. Okay, so so I'm assuming that's from the 2015 B-sides.
Yep. And there's a 2016, 17. There's a bunch of others, but that one is like the one I just seem to always go back to it. I do have this giant Spotify playlist for Black Hat Knock. So I pick all the movies and songs for Black Hat Knock. So that one is like days long. It's just different. I don't know. There's something about that playlist for 90 minutes. And I know that now, and I know when it's winding down. Okay, guys, you only got 30 minutes left. So
you got it timed out now that you can be like, oh, I got to pay attention, and I have to make an announcement here.
Yeah, Joseph called out they had a DEF CON one. That's in my list as well. It's like 6 down from it. And I have other ones besides Skittish and Bus, but just that 2015, that thing just hits, man. It's great.
What's your favorite hacker quote?
Oh, that's great. I don't know. I mean, you're going to go to the movies Hackers, right? Like the default in my head is just Hack the Planet. But then there's just a whole bunch of just really weird hacker old shows that I like to watch. And there's some of those that are just some real gems. iRobot stuff is great, but Mr. Robot, not iRobot. Mr. Robot.
iRobot's a very different one. You're good. It's late.
But yeah, my mind just comes to Hack the Planet. I don't know. There's just some nostalgia about that,
Yeah.
right? Like there was this time and this thing and that community of people, and it carried over. So like I think it's pretty legit.
Vincent, Blake, what's your favorite? I'm putting you on the spot for hacker movie quotes.
I'm in every movie ever. We were talking about that last week. Yeah, no, I don't think I really have one.
No, yeah, I'm gonna cop out with that too. I don't know. I can't remember the last time I've watched an actual like hacker movie.
They're harder to find than you think. So my at my work, we decided to do like a hacker movie, like pick a couple movies. It was supposed to be a whole day thing. We ended up picking a couple movies. One was War Games, and then the other was Hackers, of course. But like once you get past like 5, it's kind of like you're like they want to watch, like the guys at work want to watch Beekeeper, which is a Jason Statham, and it's like there's a computer in the movie, so they consider it a hacker movie. And I'm like, I don't know if that applies. Like Die Hard, Die Hard.
They're all the Die Hard, yeah.
Yeah, that's more of it because it's got the whole fire sale concept and other stuff. But like you start getting down, and it's kind of like, okay, there's not really that many hacker movies out there, but.
I mean, I'm looking at a playlist of 48 deep for Black Hat of hacker movies. So.
Okay. Okay.
Eagle Eye, Antitrust, Who Am I Am Mother, Terminal Air. Just going off the first 5.
Some of these have got to be like just really bad movies that you're just like the hacking's great, but you would just be laughing your ass off the entire time.
Well, like Ready Player One, is that a hacker movie?
That's a good question. Yes.
So I mean, it's on the list. Tron, the other Tron.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park.
There was some hacking
you
in there.
didn't say the magic word.
Enemy of the State's in there.
Yeah,
I mean,
Enemy of the State, I would say, is in there.
The net is OG hacker movie.
Yeah. I like Sneakers is one of mine, but that's more like social engineering focused, right? But it's a lot of the same concepts of trying to break into a building, essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. They're out there, and then I love too. And this is just me as doing kind of a side rant since we're talking about hacker movies. Is like Black Hat got the hacking right, because everyone complained about outside of Hackers that it was unrealistic and it wasn't true. And then you get a movie that's like accurate, and then all of a sudden, everyone in the cybersecurity community suddenly became a movie critic. Now, I did watch it, and I did never finish that movie because it is really, really freaking bad. But it was just funny watching something.
You will catch me often under my breath and with the family being like, that's not how that works. That is not how that works.
But you love Hackers, and let's be honest, no one is ever flying around in cyberspace going to the trash folder.
The Gibson.
The Gibson, yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's just a little too boring for the movies, most of it, right?
Uh-huh.
So.
Yeah. When you really get down to it, it's like you don't want to. No, there's no movie where it's like fun to watch someone typing on a screen. It's just, and really honestly too, when we're talking about CTFs, right? There's a lot of banging your head against the wall trying to find the right answer, which is quite boring. But again, that's kind of how people learn from these CTFs is spending your, like you said. I love that tip, Vincent, about the fact that like if you're banging your head against the wall, get up and walk away. Like because you might, if you even go for like a 10-minute walk, yeah, it might just pop in your head, and you're like, oh. And actually, that happened to me today when I was messing with something else. I was like, oh, maybe if I just try this. Now that still didn't work, but like those kind of ideas start popping in your head once you take yourself away from the keyboard for a little bit.
We had a photographer at a CTF event, and it's running, everything's going good, and they walk up to me and they said, when do they get the flag? And I was like, yeah, fair point. They're all getting flags this entire time. They're capturing so many flags right now, and they're like, now to explain, like they're all just sitting there, head down in a laptop, and I'm like, yeah, that's it. This is it. This is the magic. And they're waiting for an action.
They're
shot.
waiting for the blue flag.
They're waiting
rug
for
across
the
the room.
When do they get the flag? I'm like,
You should now just have like flags on either end of the room that just, and it's like, why is no one going for the flags?
Not a bad idea. Team run up and grab it. First place, second place, third place, different ones. And then when somebody leapfrogs them, they get to take it from them.
Ooh, I like that. That's really cool.
That is it. I like that idea.
Be a fight.
Make it more interactive where it just moves around. Oh man. What's the most, I guess, and speaking of challenges, what's the most interesting or challenging CTF problem that you can remember facing? Either you got it or you didn't.
It's the audio ones in packets that I wasn't expecting. Like,
Audio ones and packets?
yeah, here's a SIP conversation and cool. That's like level 1. And then suddenly you're into this, like, it's played in reverse and it's spread across a bunch of different packets and you got to reassemble them, and they dumped it into some picture and put some stego on top of it, and like they just turn it into these things. But the audio ones, like the first time I did that, like blew my mind. Like played a conversation of a telephone. I was just like, what is happening right now? You can listen, and then of course my mind's kicking. It's like, yeah, it's all network. It's like I just hadn't done that before. Audio ones blew my mind when I first did that.
Yeah, I was going to say the stego stuff, the steganography, to actually like be like, okay, yeah, we got an image, great. It's like, okay, you're not even thinking about that when you initially hit that, right? You're just like, it's like, okay, I don't know, maybe there's a hint or something. It was like, right, use the image. I'm like, okay, I got the image. I looked at it. Like, yeah, it's just a picture of some guy, whatever, right? And it's like, no. Think outside the box, right? And so then it's like, oh, wait a second, and just realizing that, the application of steganography is probably used mostly only in intel and counter intel and in CTFs, right? This is not something that is like normally used in your day-to-day job when you're, going after an incident response thing. But it's a really cool application of security and obfuscation and everything, and using it within CTF was really cool. So yeah, the first time I saw that, I was kind of mind blown.
Well, I will say, I just recently read an article. I can't remember what it was, but and I thought about this, like to your point, it's like I've seen stenography in CTS before, and it is like a little bit wild. But then I recently read an article where I think attackers are starting to like images getting past, email filters and hiding essentially code in there so that when the image loads, it tries to run the JavaScript code. So I think, and like you were saying, it's more nation state, but I feel like that might start filtering down. So actually doing some of that stuff in the CTF might actually help, people doing incident response.
There was those magic image stuff for a lot of years, and they just keep finding new variants of it. So yeah,
I remember the magic stuff. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, the escalation of the email and phishing wars back in the day, right? So it was like started and they just write an email, hey, send us your money. Here's the address, right? Then it was like, yep, nope, we're blocking those. So then it's like, here's the URL to click, right? Oh, click here and then send us your money. Nope, started blocking those, right? And then as it escalated, you started getting ones where it was just the image that said, okay, send us your money. But, unless you read the image, you weren't able to block that very easily. And then started getting to technologies that could block that sort of stuff too. And then they would still use the images to say like, okay, it's an encrypted file, send the image with the password in the image. So then you're still, so it's just like this escalation that continues, and images were always part of that.
Yeah. Blake, I know you didn't do a lot of CTFs like me, but is there a challenge that has kind of stuck out in your head, or even just one? Have you done the Corelight CTF? Like, have you had to like go through it and do it just so you understand it?
Oh yeah, and I can promise there's nothing crazy like that.
There's no audio.
Yeah, we don't have replayed audio over stego encryption. We got nothing like that.
We should.
If I think back hard enough, I'm sure I could remember something from Hack the Box. But nothing crazy like people come up with. At these cons or these big CTFs, right? There's always some sort of gimmick, something that the creator wants to bake in there to make theirs a little bit more enticing or difficult than the next person's, so that they stand out. But nothing too memorable on my side.
Yeah.
The worst ones are the RE ones, because I remember how much I hate assembly.
I've heard that before a lot. It's like it's a whole little niche for a lot of people. Either you love it or you absolutely hate it.
It's the worst.
Yeah. And I just thought of another tip, and you guys can tell me, if I'm correct in this, is like sometimes you can overthink a problem.
Oh,
I remember walking up to someone. He's going to school, but to me, it's a lot of the same thing for a CTF, where he's trying to get challenges or answers correct, and he's like, I can't find the server, and he was like trying to find a public IP to put in there, and I was like, dude, like it says server, that's probably an internal IP address that you need to use. So it's like little things like that where you just like overthink stuff and you think it's got to be something else, and it's really just like, no, it's just simple. Think of the simple answer.
Yeah, I mean, to Vince's point, I've ran into crap just like that where it was they give you a hint, they gave you a thing like a picture, whatever, and it's like the answer's so stupid, but they've also included like a zip file or an access to a thing, and I just go squirreling on the harder thing, and then you come back and it's just like, oh, it's in the image, and that was just a red herring.
Yeah. Those bastards. How many red herrings are in your CTF? Do you put red herrings in there, or?
No, there are. The goal isn't to have a question for you to have a hard time because you didn't understand the question. We want the questions clear and concise and lead you in that right direction. I know that's not true for all CTFs, and we don't necessarily have red herrings, but there are things you have to pay attention to. It'll be like the SQL commands from the user, right? And everybody will try all these wrong answers. And it's like, oh, there's only one of those users. There's only one of those that was in the user's database, right? Like the users, sometimes it's not necessarily red herring. It's just people going a little too fast. And sometimes it's just a change up. You're asking client server, client server, client server, and then suddenly it flips to something and they just go down memory. And so I don't know if that's a red herring or trying to teach you a new skill or what.
Context switching would kind of be how it's having to, and again, that's I think where breaks are important. Going back to Vincent's advice, it's like take a break.
Yeah, I was going to say just what you did, Pope, and that I've definitely run some of those CTFs where it's like it's like the SAT, right? Or I don't know, honestly, the CISSP, it's probably the most annoying example of where they try to ask the questions in such a weird way to confuse you, right? Where it's like, yeah, I think your CTFs are straightforward and the questions are not meant to confuse. And then, I don't know, we did one a while ago and it was like, when there were a few confusing things, you guys take requests to fix it. It's like, hey, I didn't quite, like the question was weird. Like I thought you were asking X and it was really Y. Like, can you rephrase it? The other thing I was going to say on the earlier point is, especially if you're in a progressive one, kind of like the Corelight one, where it should start generally easier and get harder, then yeah, don't start overthinking those first 5 questions, right? It's like, what's the name of the server? People are like, okay, well, it can't be that simple. The name of the server right there. I'm going to go deep down into the logs to find. It's like, no, it's the name of the server. Like that was it, right? So
I need to take it and put it in and figure out the hash name for the server of what that would be, right. And yeah.
Literally, the very first question I think on the CTF is something about the TLD, like what TLD, and like people will just start jumping in, looking at all DNS logs of all the things to try to find the TLD. And it's like, it is literally in the alert name. Like it is the start of the CTF, my dude. Like you are thinking way too hard. The alert name says TLD.thing, like start with that would be. So yeah, some people 10 minutes in, they're like, I can't even figure out your first question. I'm like, it started you there. What are you doing?
Take a step back. Yeah, for sure. What is, I guess, what's something about a CTF that we haven't already talked about that you guys think would be important?
I think about it probably a little different. I think most people watching will be thinking about it from how to play, how to win, how to learn new skills, and those are all valuable. Don't get me wrong. I think about it of how to have a fun, engaging game that can't get wrecked. And I've been wrecked before, and I don't like it. I had one night, we had a 2-day CTF, and everybody finished it in like just over half a day. And so that night, I had to make 8 hours of CTF. And so I think about like not getting wrecked, and part of that right now is around AI, right? So if your CTF can just be answered with AI, do you have a good CTF? I don't know. Valid question. As long as everybody's on the same playing field, I don't know that it matters, but maybe advertise it as such. And so a lot of people started like AIing, looking for their own answers, but also training the AI in the thing that they were hoping wasn't in there, which is interesting. And then now AI agents, especially the new ones where you can give Gemini or ChatGPT like take over your screen and have it walk through stuff and give it parameters. Like it's a lot harder to build CTFs because it has access to the same sim and the same UI, and it can do things. Corelight data, Zeek data, Suricata data become much easier than a lot of other data because they're open source, and whether right or wrong, I'm not here to say. LLMs are trained on most open source things, most GitHub repositories that exist, things like that. And so they're pretty good at those. And so you have to think about if we set you up for a 2-hour CTF and you finish it in 15 minutes, well, that's not a good CTF, is it? So
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that was definitely one question I was going to ask. Is as far as like using AI, I was part of the here in Nashville ISSA CTF, and I had some hit or miss with the CTF as far as like using some of the using AI as part of like I feel like it was useful for certain things, but not everything.
Yeah, you got to be real smart about it. Because it'll just make up crap because it thinks that's what.
Yeah, that's what I was reading into.
So, but there are ways to do it.
Yeah.
You just say like, here's the question, here's the data set. I need you to go through the data set, validate that the answers in the data set corresponds to the question, and then when it comes to certain thing like Zeek logs, it does really good until it needs to like do a pivot, and then you got to teach it how to pivot. You need to use a UID to pivot into the DNS log to get the query and the answer, and then it does it, and then it forgets that you ever told it that later. So like it's getting better, but CTFs have to level up their game or make different things because they're just going to get wrecked and nobody wants that.
Are you using AI then to help build CTFs?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm using AI to build CTFs. Started on it last year. We have to make like, so the Cyber Cup one is essentially we got to have 11 hours of content for professionals. They're people like Blake who work at places that like Blake works at, and they're NDR experts and SIM experts, and they come in through and just destroy your game, right? So that same CTF, if we do it for normal people, it's double the length. So let's say it's 11 hours there, we've made 22 hours of content. That's a lot of content to make. And so I do similar things. I'll feed it pieces of data set. It doesn't do well, like their token limits, like Gemini has a higher token limit than the rest, so I use that for a bunch of stuff. But you have to feed it, like, here's the data sets, here's my questions, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. All the ones that we do are based on real attacks. So either they are a real attack, anonymized, or it's based on a real attack. And so we want to walk through a forensic investigation, essentially. And if you don't like get AI in the right direction, it's just going to ask 18 questions about something nobody cares about. And okay, cool. Nobody cares. Back to the focus. So yeah, I'll feed it bits. And then you have to say like, good questions. Make sure that the data set contains the answer for the question, and then apply that answer. And then sometimes you still go look and it just goes weird. I tried to build it all into a single app. It's like 4 apps. Because it doesn't, you got to give each step. Essentially, it's like you got to use an agent to like stitch between them.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then you're going to spend a few hours curating and tuning it up at the end anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's, as with anything, any usage of that technology, it's a tool, right? And it's best that you use that tool to accelerate things that you need to do or learn about more, right? Like, what's the point of using the AI to just win the CTF? I mean, unless that's what you're going to win a, fuzzy prize or whatever. But like, if you're there with, a bunch of your friends or colleagues, you're trying to, learn something about this, seems like that's the wrong approach.
But AI is hosing me a little bit. Okay, so Corelight, we built in a bunch of AI things like Suricata payload descriptions and explaining it in English, and session summaries, like what's going on here, what's likely, a bunch of summaries of things that are happening on that network traffic. I used to have to lead people to that, and so now I gotta like dance around it, stitch around. Like I can't ask questions about a Suricata rule anymore because it's like, there's the answer, and I'm like, yep. Cool. So it has forced me to change things because AI is making things easier for analysts and makes I have to make my CTFs harder.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and I'm going to kind of get a little bit more, it's towards CTFs, but you just said it right there, are we kind of, with AI, we're kind of lowering the bar, but at the same time, like, do we have to move to that next level for analysts, CTFs, you know, whatever within the cybersecurity space? Because I feel like there's a lot of, like, I guess, tedious work, and we talk about burnout within like a SOC analyst network, you know, detection environment, right? Where there's just a lot of tedious, boring stuff that you have to look at. I was in a SOC for 8 months, absolutely hated it. 4 months in, I realized, like, I cannot do this work because I was looking at a timestamp, and so I knew what I was doing throughout the day based on the timestamp. Like, it was like you're just watching the clock continue on throughout the day, which is very frustrating for me. But I feel like it can do some of that lower level stuff that then we can allow analysts to do some of the more in-depth kind of discovery of, like, what's actually going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easy answer is it's upskilling a lot of analysts, right? Whether it's baked into the tool or external. If I was going to train you on Suricata, historically that would be half-day training probably. Read a rule, tune a rule, write a rule, right? Well, that's changed a lot. Now it is the rules read for you. Here's the rule in plain English. If I was doing a CTF, which a lot of CTFs, in my opinion, are very educational, trying to steer you to learn something, and I was going to do that CTF for Suricata, I had a solid 10 questions around reading that rule ready to go. And now it's just like, well, this host talked to this host and flagged on this payload as part of this thing. And you're like, okay, cool. So I don't need to do that anymore. And you know, I said that in a little negative, like, oh, it's forces me to do stuff, but like, that's better for analysts, right? You get a junior analyst, instead of turning around and asking Vince, hey, what does this mean? What's a SID? What's this arrow mean in directionality? They now have this in plain English, and they can just answer questions and get better at skill. And so I think it's a win right now. It's doing the same thing for attackers though too, right? So they're getting better phishing emails. They're getting better attacks. You want to just match on an IOC. They can now write me a C2 and a Dolphin version of LLM that has a different hash and goes around your detection. So it's gone both sides. They're up. We're being upskilled.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, right? SOC analysts sitting there having to triage X number of alerts all day, every day. All of these platforms are moving towards using AI and moving towards an analyst coming in with lower experience, just being able to clearly understand what's going on and quickly escalate that to whoever's above them. And cutting down that time is going to enable all these, analysts that spend all of their time just, triaging alerts to be able to go into more of those threat hunting methodologies, which is where we need to be, right? We don't need people, closing out alerts that don't matter. We need them looking for the threat actors that are evading these basic detections through, threat hunting. And I think that's the benefit, especially of Corelight CTF. And, probably a lot of others. It gets you thinking outside of just that, okay, here's the basic principles I need to understand. It's, here, you need to look at this log type and you need to look for this subtle section within it to get you to the next step so that you understand what's going on at a fundamental level to then start that upscaling.
Yeah, exactly. You still gotta learn the basics, right? That's my favorite quote about AI is that it's a chainsaw masquerading as a butter knife, and it's like that's just the best description, right?
That's a really good description.
Yeah, and so in the hands of the right person, it's just the most powerful enabling technology. But if you don't understand the fundamentals, or at least take the chance and opportunity to give yourself that basic understanding of what you're looking at before you let the AI do it, well, you're going to be stuck with the calculator is the only way you can do your math problem, and you don't understand what it's actually doing. So
yeah, absolutely. All right,
you get ChatGPT to do your test for you, but then when the exam comes up and you can't use it,
yep.
Oh.
Well, I think we've always talked about critical thinking skills. I feel like that's where we can kind of move some of this stuff, because a lot of that you definitely bring on entry-level, junior-level people to do some of the more tedious stuff. And if we can get rid of that and then allow them to kind of grow into, like you said, Vince, is still understanding the basics of stuff, but still being able to then go a level deeper, like it just makes those people better. So I am going to promote the network-based CTF with Corelight that we're going to do on February 25th. I'm doing the date because this podcast I usually release on Tuesday, so it'd probably already be out by the time this is over. But if you're on YouTube, go check that out at meetup.com. Definitely check out Corelight. I feel like I've just done 3 months worth of stuff with Corelight. So we have this, of course, which I appreciate you guys coming on for. I also check out a podcast from exploresec.com/EAS where I did it with the CEO, Brian Dye. We had a conversation about, NDRs and stuff like that. So it's been a very, very, very good conversation every single time. I absolutely love I love this conversation. I love the one with Brian. I'm very excited for the CTF coming up. What else do you guys want to plug for either Corelight or even something personal?
It's pretty open-ended, man.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've talked about like like we were talking even before that.
I was just going to say, do something in your community. Go
That's
participate. Good. There's B-sides everywhere. There's DEF CON groups everywhere. You don't have to be an InfoSec junkie, but find a meetup, get to know some people in real life who have, shared things that you enjoy, like hacking and InfoSec stuff, and go do that. So I'm going to promote all the local meetups that exist.
Which is what this started as, by the way. It's and like I said, I'm kind of doing some rebranding with it, but like to your point, we actually, me and a buddy went to B-Sides Charleston in 2013, and we were like, oh, we got to do this. And I was like, whoa. You know what it takes to start a conference, like actually run a conference, even just a one-day one. It's like, let's start with a meetup. It's 1 hour a month. We did that. And 10 years later, we're still doing it. So to your point, James, like I we started our own thing, but you don't have to necessarily do that. Meetup.com has been wonderful for us. So I wish we had it 10 years ago, because we did get up to 25, 30 people in Columbia, South Carolina, by the way, before COVID. Now, COVID then wrecked everything, and we never got up to those numbers again. But Meetup has allowed us to expand. We're going to continue to do the virtual things like this. But like you said, going and being in person is just a really great thing. And B-Sides events and, some of the other local community things are like, to your point, are very valuable for people.
Last non-paid thing too is know what's on your network. Go install Zeek at your house. Go install Suricata at your house, and actually see what things are doing. See what your VPN's really doing. See what your IoT devices are actually doing. Like
your fridge really is talking.
It's all going to China.
Yeah, it's all going to. I was just gonna say, my kids have TikTok on their phones. I know most of my traffic's going to China at this point.
I'll actually throw out, I do know a CTF. I'll plug in Trace Labs, if you guys have ever heard of them. OSINT-based CTF, where they take missing people and get a whole bunch of people together, and you have very little information about their name, their family, their last known location, and teams of people go out and try and get information to find them.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Well, you kind of stole my thunder on the open source side of Zeek, but that's totally true. I mean, not only that, there are, I was going to say it a little differently, which is cybersecurity has gotten so fragmented and siloed and specialized that I think it's really important to pop your head out and go check out something you've never done. Go do the network one if you're all endpoint. Like for me, I need to go back and again, I did a cloud, CTF recently, or go and do an EDR one, because I don't spend my time looking at that sort of data. It's really important to not just be so heads down in your little area that you forget that cybersecurity is this amazing world, and you may go find something out there in the rest of it that you really find exciting, might draw you in a different direction.
The network's huge. Like, you guys are in a space where the network is everything, because everything runs across it. And even, I did a lot with application security, built programs with developers but there's a lot of network involved with that kind of stuff. So to your point, I think that's a great bit of advice, is if you feel like, oh, it's a network, I'm not in networking, going and understanding that. I will tell you, and you guys might kill me for this, I don't like doing network stuff. I was a network administrator, so I understand it, but that understanding has actually informed a lot of the other stuff I enjoy doing, because I've even, I was in the Navy for 6 years. One of the first things I learned was how to do a Cat5 cable, like actually crimp it, create my own Cat5 cables. But and having that understanding of it's not this magical thing, is very important and informs a lot because it's everywhere. Networking is absolutely everything that we're on networking equipment right now. We're going through, this is getting fed through all, everything is going through the network. So I think it's a very valuable thing to at least have some sort of basic understanding of. All right, gentlemen. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for joining me to discuss how to participate in a CTF.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim and everyone.
Absolutely.